Picture this. You're walking through your own neighborhood when a couple of guys in uniforms step out of an SUV, flash some fake-looking badges, and demand to see your ID. They say you're loitering and threaten to call the cops if you don't leave. But here's the kicker. The man they just tried to intimidate. Yeah, that's my father. And he's not just some random guy, he's the county sheriff. These so-called HOA enforcers had no idea who they were messing with. They were acting like real officers, barking orders, and even trying to put my dad in handcuffs, all because he was standing outside his own home. At first, he played along, letting them dig their own hole deeper. But when one of them reached for his belt, probably thinking he had an actual weapon, my dad had no choice but to drop the act. That's when everything flipped. You won't believe how fast their confidence vanished when they realized they weren't in control anymore. Their faces went pale, and suddenly, they had a lot of explaining to do. But trust me, this story only gets crazier from here. What happened next? Let's just say those fake cops had the worst day of their lives, and they brought it all on themselves. Stay tuned, because this is one for the books. The moment my dad reached for his badge, the mood shifted. Those two fake HOA cops had been full of attitude just seconds ago, acting like they ran the place. But as soon as he flashed his credentials, their eyes widened. You could see the gears turning in their heads, trying to figure out how badly they had just screwed up. But here's the thing. My dad didn't say a word at first. He just let the silence do the work. One of the guys, the taller one with a clipboard, actually took a step back, like he was rethinking every life choice that led him to this moment. The shorter one, the one who had tried to grab my dad's arm, cleared his throat and mumbled something about just doing their job. That's when my dad finally spoke. "Your job?" he asked, his voice calm but firm. "What department do you work for again?" They didn't have an answer, because there wasn't one. That's when my dad looked down at the fake badge clipped to the taller guy's belt. It wasn't even close to legit, more like something you'd find in a toy store. Now, at this point, I'm watching from the porch, trying not to laugh. But I also know my dad, and I can tell he's just getting started. The silence stretched between them, thick with tension. The fake HOA cops kept glancing at each other, probably hoping the other one had a way out of this mess. But my dad wasn't letting him off the hook that easily. He stepped forward just enough to make them sweat. "So, let me get this straight," he said, crossing his arms. "You're out here enforcing neighborhood rules. In what capacity?" The taller guy forced a weak smile. "We were the HOA security team, just making sure everything stays in order." My dad raised an eyebrow. "Security team, huh? Who hired you?" The shorter guy swallowed hard. "It's just part of our contract." His voice was shaking now. "We patrol the area, keep out trespassers." Now, this was interesting, because here's the thing. Our neighborhood doesn't have an HOA. Never has. It's a county-governed community, which means no random group has the right to police anything. My dad knew that. I knew that. But these two, either they didn't do their homework, or they thought they could intimidate the wrong people. That's when my dad did something that made them panic even more. He reached for his radio, not his phone, his actual police radio. And the second he clicked it on, you could see the realization hit them like a ton of bricks. The sound of the radio crackling into life seemed to freeze the air around us. My dad didn't even speak into it at first, letting the two fake cops hear the static, the unmistakable noise of a real sheriff's office. The taller one took a half step back, his hand twitching like he wanted to run, but something kept him rooted in place. The shorter guy, who had been the most aggressive, started looking around, clearly realizing he was in way over his head. "Don't call anyone," the shorter guy stammered, his voice trembling now. This is just a misunderstanding." My dad didn't even flinch. "A misunderstanding," he repeated, his tone colder than I'd ever heard it. "You try to cuff me for loitering, and you call it a misunderstanding." The tension hung heavy, thick with fear on their part and authority on his. I could see their eyes darting back and forth, searching for an escape, but there was nowhere to go. My dad's presence was too commanding, and the radio on his belt buzzed again, a constant reminder that they were trapped in this little game they'd started. I could almost hear their minds racing. Were they about to be arrested? Did they think they could talk their way out of this? I honestly wasn't sure what they thought anymore. Then, the taller guy did something unexpected. He looked at the shorter one, nodded quickly, and before my dad could say another word, they'd both bolted. They turned and ran, not even bothering to look back. My dad didn't chase them, but I could see the wheels turning in his mind. There was more to this than just a couple of random 1-8 cops. Something bigger was going on, and it wasn't over yet. Just when I thought it was over, that's when things took a sharp turn. The two guys were running across the yard, heading straight for their SUV. But just as they reached the vehicle, I heard the unmistakable sound of tires screeching from the road behind us. At first, I figured it was just another car passing by. But then I saw it, a black SUV, dark windows, and it came to a stop just behind the fake cop's getaway car. The engine shut off and the door opened. A man stepped out, his posture rigid and deliberate. He wore a suit, but something about him didn't seem right. He didn't look like any HOA official I'd ever seen. The two fake cops froze. They seemed to recognize him instantly, their panic turning into fear. They took a step back as the suited man approached them with slow, calculated steps. My dad watched the scene unfold, and I could feel the tension rising again. This wasn't just a random encounter anymore. The stakes were suddenly much higher. "Get in the car," the suited man said, his voice cold and commanding. The shorter guy hesitated for a split second, then nodded and climbed into the SUV. The taller one was still standing there, looking between my dad and the new arrival. It was clear he was having second thoughts, but that didn't last long. Without saying another word, he followed his partner, sliding into the vehicle just as the man in the suit walked back to the driver's side. Before they drove off, the suited man turned toward us, his gaze locking with my dad's. He didn't say a word, but the look he gave was enough. There was something seriously off about all of this, and I had a feeling we weren't done yet. The SUV drove off, the engine rumbling down the street, leaving behind a trail of dust and unanswered questions. My dad didn't move for a few seconds, his eyes narrowing, studying the departing vehicle as if he were calculating the next move. I could feel the weight of the silence between us, but I knew this wasn't over, not by a long shot. "We need to follow them," my dad muttered under his breath, more to himself than to me. His tone had shifted. This wasn't just a random encounter anymore. Something bigger was unfolding, and he wasn't going to let it slip away. I nodded, but before we could even react, my dad's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, glanced at the screen, and his expression changed immediately. His eyes went wide, his hand shaking ever so slightly as he read the message. "Looks like I was right," he said, more to himself than to me. "We've got a problem." He tapped a screen, quickly pulling up a map on his phone. There were several red dots blinking, marking locations around the area. These weren't just random spots. They were properties, buildings, and most notably, the one marked just a mile away from where we were standing, the county sheriff's department. "Whoever those guys are," my dad said, his voice tense, "they're part of something much bigger. And they've got people inside the department." Just as he said that, we heard a voice behind us, calm, measured, but with a chill that ran down my spine. "Sheriff, I think you've already seen enough." I turned around, my heart racing. The suited man from the SUV was back, standing in our yard. But this time, his expression was different. It wasn't just about intimidation anymore. "I think you're in deeper than you realize," he said, pulling a badge from his jacket pocket. A real one, the kind that made my dad's badge look like a cheap knockoff. And in that moment, everything I thought I understood about this situation crumbled. The twist hit me like a freight train. This wasn't some random scam. This was a carefully orchestrated plan, one that had been in motion for months, maybe even years. The man stepped closer, locking eyes with my dad. "You've been investigating us for weeks," he said, his voice low. "And now it's time for you to choose. Join us, or be silenced." There was no hesitation in my dad's voice as he responded, but just before he could say anything, the suited man smiled, almost like he was expecting it. Then, without warning, he snapped his fingers. The ground beneath us rumbled, and I could hear sirens in the distance, closing in fast. But as the suited man turned to walk away, I caught a glimpse of something unexpected, his hand tucked inside his coat, a familiar badge glinting. Only this time, it wasn't just a badge. It was a symbol I recognized. It was the same one my dad had worn, and suddenly, everything went dark. The sirens grew louder, but the suited man's smirk faded as quickly as it appeared. Just before he could disappear into the shadows, my dad's voice rang out, sharp and commanding. "You're not getting away this time." I watched as my dad, with a force I hadn't seen in years, pulled out his own phone and activated a silent alert. Within seconds, backup arrived, real deputies, not imposters. It was over. The suited man's face twisted in frustration as the real officers surrounded him, arresting him and the fake HOA enforcers who had been a part of the larger scheme. My dad had been right all along. They weren't just pretending to be neighborhood security. They were part of an underground operation, infiltrating key positions within local government and law enforcement. The goal was control over property rights, zoning laws, and more. The entire town had been under their radar. As the suited man was taken away in cuffs, I couldn't help but feel a mix of relief and anger. The truth was, it was just the beginning of a much bigger story. My dad had cracked open something huge, but it wasn't over yet. And whatever came next, we were ready. Because when it comes to protecting the people you love, you don't back down, not for anything.